already. So training camp began 3 weeks ago. The team lost another major contributor that we thought was going to be a part of the team in Ellaby at linebacker. The Saints decided to place him on IR, but news came out they're going to release him soon as he's healed and available to be released to another team and waived, which leads me to this. Sean Payton has talked about this availability for the past few seasons. It happened with Keenan Lewis, C.J. Spiller has been a victim. Bird has been a victim of it as well. The availability saga has continued on with the Saints' number one cornerback, Delvin Breaux. On yesterday, the Advocate's Nick Underhill reported that the team was interested in shopping Breaux's services around in the NFL. That was partly due to Sean Payton's frustration from his lack of availability of being on the field. Well, he was not available because he was injured. That frustration was verified today by Sean Payton in a interview that he did with the media. However, it was discovered that Delvin Breaux's injury was not just a simple leg contusion, but instead he had a break in his fibula. The fibula is the small bone that's connected to the larger bone that supports us near the ankle. And since then, the team has decided to dismiss two of their doctors on staff because of the misdiagnosis of Delvin Breaux. So, Barry, let me throw this out at you. Do you believe that Mickey and Sean has handled this situation with Delvin Breaux to the best of their ability, or to the normal way the Saints handle things in a dysfunctional manner?
It's dysfunction junction, man. Look, these guys on the fly have had to backtrack and cover their butts, so to speak. I won't use the word that you know I would normally use, because basically, long story. And look, let me give you the rundown as how I see it, and it's in my latest article that's up at Saints News, which is where I say the Saints should be embarrassed by the incompetence of their medical staff, and I'm just speaking the truth. Here's the deal. As I know it, as I understand it, this is from my inside sources that I've spoken to in the last 3 days since this has gone on. Delvin Breaux wasn't practicing. The thought was always that he only had a leg contusion. So because he wasn't practicing, he's missed most of training camp. The assumption, I guess would be the word I'll use, was that he may have been milking the injury a little bit. Now, back in my day, I'm an old school guy. Back in my day in the 70s, we called that loafing. So that's a pretty serious charge to say that a guy is loafing, especially a guy like Delvin Breaux who's, overcome, a neck injury and his story is well known throughout the NFL. So to make that, now, I don't know if that's what they actually thought, but the fact that the word was essentially leaked, I would call it, to Nick Underhill or whoever that was that broke the. I know Nick Underhill broke the story. Now, whether it was leaked to him intentionally, because obviously his source is somebody within the organization. Okay. Now, whether that was Sean Payton, whether that was somebody on within the organization speaking on behalf of Sean Payton, or whatever the case scenario, however you want to look at it, from whatever perspective you want to look at it. The thought was that he should be out on the field practicing, and he was not. So that perturbed Payton. That's why maybe he tried to put a little subliminal message out there Monday at the press conference about availability, and basically, we need you here type of thing. And coincidentally, all the injured players happened to practice that day. Ramczyk came back, Lattimore came back, Unger came back. They all came back on that same day. So it was obvious that throughout the building, And in the locker room, word got around that if you're not seriously hurt, you better put on the pads and the helmet and get out there. And that's exactly what everybody did. To my understanding, Bro tried to, was going to give it a shot, and he just knew something wasn't right. So he went to Ochsner, decided to get that second opinion. They did the X-rays at Ochsner, and lo and behold, he's got a fractured fibula. So, man, I mean, how do you miss that? I mean, to me, that's just, it reminds me of the C.J. Spiller thing. Because if you remember, they signed C.J. Spiller, and then he got to camp, and he was in training camp, 3 or 4 days? And then they sent him to Alabama to see Dr. James Andrews to get his knee worked on and get some cleanup work done. Well, why would you sign a guy as a free agent for Buffalo Bills if you knew he was quote-unquote damaged goods? Okay? So I hate to be critical because I always sound like I'm this, big critic of the Saints. But, I mean, come on. I mean, what are these guys? I mean, these are medical professionals at a reputable corporation like Ochsner, who they're employed by, and also employed by the teams, the Saints and Pelicans, because Dr. Surrey is also the head doctor for the Pelicans. So to have both, and this ain't just the Saints now. This is the Pelicans. I mean, you got guys like Omer Asik, and I can name a handful of Pelicans players, Quincy Pondexter, just guys that have spent more time on the bench than they have out on the court. And to me, it's directly related to the medical staff. That's pretty much, a lot of these doctors or trainers are working for both teams. And, maybe it's coincidence. I don't think so. But it just speaks to the issues that they've had over the years. If you saw all the tweets today by Jeff Duncan, Larry Holder, Mike Triplett, pretty much any kind of beat writer that covers the Saints or columnist that covers the Saints, they all tweeted out the same thing, basically, which was this has always been an underlying theme or an underlying narrative, so to speak, that this team has issues with their medical staff and the way they do things as a staff, or as the way they train, the way they just everything to do with taking care of players. I've heard stuff about how every other NFL team, you got 32 NFL teams. I've always heard that the Saints do their stuff completely different. Not within the norm, so to speak. And I'm not inside the building at 5800 Airlines, so I can't speak to it, with a lot of confidence, because I'm not behind closed doors. I can only speak to what I've been told and what I've heard.
Right.
But obviously today they decided to be proactive and take the measures that they took. To me, it's a little too late. You should have done this years ago. If you thought this was an issue, why did you wait till today to have it happen? Because to me, it seemed like Delvin Breaux, because he's such a popular, beloved player, and he's a New Orleans guy, he's one of the most popular Saints on the team, probably outside of Drew Brees and Michael Thomas and maybe Peterson now and Mark Ingram. I mean, I can list on my hand the most popular Saints players, and Delvin Breaux is easily one of those players. And I think they were afraid of the blowback. I think they obviously, realized they made a huge mistake. I mean, you're talking lawsuits and all this kind of stuff. I mean, if I'm Delvin Breaux, I'm going to make the Saints take care of me because they're culpable. They're culpable in all this, and this is a huge black eye on the organization, in my personal opinion. And they owe it to the fan base. They owe it to the people that spend their hard-earned money on tickets every Sunday. It costs $200 to go to a Saints game if you're a fan. By the time you pay for parking and take your family to eat and all that, you drop $200 like it ain't nothing. Yeah. So you owe it to those fans that drop $200 on your butt every Sunday, and to at least make sure you're putting the best product out on the field that you can. And so to me, it's inexcusable, and they have a lot of making up to do.
Yeah, it's a lot to be concerned with, especially when it comes to misdiagnosing a player's injury. Of course, a doctor cannot prevent injury, but to have this to be a reoccurring theme with the two clubs, the Pelicans as well as the Saints, it brings a lot of concern. And I hear you, Coach Rick Gailey. What's going on, Coach? How you doing?
I'm doing okay, Kyle T. I'm sorry it took me a while to get back with y'all, but I'm certainly happy to get the season started off this evening. And really in a topic that I've been discussing publicly for more than 3 years. Because I have a bit of, I'm not a doctor. I can't even play one on TV. But I do have a background in athletic training. One of the many jobs I've had in this profession was that of an athletic trainer. And as I've mentioned several times, my wife is a physical therapist who's a chemistry teacher. So we kind of have all these topics from many different directions. Now, I'm going to state that I'm also an Ochsner patient. And depending on a meeting I have with the doctor tomorrow, I am wishing Ochsner and staff members there nothing but the very best.
Yeah, of course.
An A+ game every day to take care of my sorry butt. But this is something that more than 3 years ago, along with Eric Asher, who's a local radio personality, and I've spent a good bit of time with, we started discussing this back in the year that Jairus Byrd got signed. And something that had perked my attention at that particular time. It was actually a couple of things. One was a meeting with Ed Reed when the Super Bowl was down here, when I became acutely aware that many people in the NFL have their own medical staff because they don't trust the team's medical staff. Mm-hmm. And then after that, Jairus Byrd getting signed, and then immediately the Saints medical staff go for if you remember, the microdiscectomy for his chronic back problem. I knew he had a back problem when he was in Buffalo, so that wasn't any secret. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I heard that, my ears started perking up, because if you remember, Tiger Woods right before that had the very same procedure, and it was supposed to be out for 6 weeks, and 6 weeks became 3 months, and the 3 months became 6 months. And really, he never came back from that and many other issues.
Right.
So I had studied it when Tiger Woods was having the procedure, and I'm thinking, wait a second, they're taking a very aggressive approach. It's a small surgery. It's micro, right? It's a small surgery, but that's the small surgery is what's on somebody else. But I knew that it was somewhat involved, especially for a football player. So this is tricky to, in fact, say the least. And he really never came back from that. It took much longer, if you remember his first year, than we thought. Then he came back, and then by midseason had a meniscus, I believe, injury in his knee, so he was out that year. The next year was another problem. Then they finally get a year out of him, but he's nowhere near the player that he was. Well, anyway, going back. That got my attention. I started looking back through several players since Drew Brees. That was a different medical staff that approved Drew Brees, by the way. It wasn't the Ochsner staff. And the Saints, if you remember, were the only staff that approved Drew Brees.
That's right.
Back in 2006. If the Miami Dolphins had approved him, guess where he was going to be?
Miami.
We were it.
That's right.
So, but it was a different group, a group that I'm familiar with, too, with Tulane Medical, as I remember, Dr. Greg Stewart and others, legendary group of physicians. Saints were at the top of their medical game then, but then the Ochsner deal came around. It's almost been 10 years now with the Saints. But during the time, if you go back through the history of all the injured players on both the Saints and the Pelicans, something seems to be pretty steady. Number one, it takes a long time to get it diagnosed. Number two, it always takes longer to heal than is predicted. And it very often becomes chronic, and very often when the players leave the Saints, or the Pelicans especially, it's really obvious with the Pelicans, they wind up getting better and better long term. Mm-hmm. So there's some real issues there. It's been going on a long time. This is not